Welcome to the Nerds and Friends podcast. I'm Josh Lindquist, and I have my co-host Will Shaw joining me tonight. And today we are very honored to have the awesome Claudia Blood, author, D&D nerd, and just all-around awesome person. So we're really happy to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, our listeners missed out on me and Claudia were sharing our love for D&D before this interview. So there's an instant bond there with a fellow creative and a fellow player. So that's awesome.
Yeah, D&D on Discord. I was like, I got to figure that out. That sounds pretty cool.
It's pretty great. So
Yeah.
I've been enjoying it a lot. So, but before we gush about D&D more, which I know all three of us can do for hours, it seems like, let's talk about your books. I love your. I'm just going to read from your Amazon bio really quick. Award-winning author Claudia Blood blends her science and IT background with a lifelong passion for D&D to pen epic fantasies and science fiction sagas. So we're going to put a link to all your stuff in the podcast description because we want everyone to visit it. And I love that you have an IT background, and I want to hear how that plays into your writing. But first, just tell us about like your book series, like whichever one you want to focus on promoting, or let's just dive into what you've written so far.
Sure. So I've got a prequel coming out on a series called Renegades Rising, which is Ravine's story. And she is the bad guy from the Relic Trilogy. And so it's like her backstory and how she set up the whole entire thing.
Wow, that's neat.
Yeah. Very and she had to go bad to do good, I think, is sort of the tagline for it or something like that. Yeah.
That's cool. I always find villains that are totally convinced, and maybe there's even some element of truth to them being like, what I'm doing is the right thing, even though everyone else is like, hey, you can't do that. So then you have a more interesting dichotomy between them and the protagonist, you know?
Yeah. And she really did. She the poor girl, or the poor woman, she lost her daughter and blamed herself, and decided that she needed to create time travel in order to save her daughter. I mean, as you do, obviously, right?
Yeah, but I can see how that can go wrong in a lot of ways too. So
yeah, just a couple.
Yeah. Well, that sounds fascinating.
Yep. That really ends up being kind of a hallmark of like a really good villain, when you can like have a spin-off that just goes into their story where they can be their own protagonist.
Yeah. And I really loved her, and I would not do some of the things that she chose to do because she was not a very good person, but I mean, I get it. You're trying to get back your family. Yeah.
And that's where that's the fun draw, where the audience is like, oh, I get what you're doing, but I can't root for you, but I want to, and like you're pulled, and that's good storytelling.
I mean, there's like airlocks and scientists that end up going out, and just like terrible things, you know. So yeah.
That sounds really fascinating.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about how you blend in your IT background with your writing? I'm curious to hear about that.
So I was a Java developer. I still kind of am. Yep. So Java developer in IT, and then went into like business analyst. And I find myself as a business analyst, and even as an IT, like you get this problem and there's a lot of different ways you can solve it. And so like asking all those different questions about like the ideal solution kind of lets you like move things around and figure out how to put it together in like a really good solution. And then you test it, right? Like, what do you do in IT? Like, you test stuff, right? You do unit testing, you do the rest of it, and you come through, and then it does something unexpected. You're like, all right, I guess I need to fix that bug and, you know, figure it out. And writing is sort of weirdly the same way. So you go through like your whole entire story, read it end to end, and then you go, oh, plot hole. Shit, that's a bug. Okay, what do I do to fix it? And you put in all the extra things you need to kind of, you know, make the code better and make it more testable. That was a little dorky. Okay, moving on.
No, that was a great metaphor though. Like, yeah, that's really fascinating. We've had a lot of authors on this podcast, but we've never had someone with an IT background. And I love how you blend those, because now that you're saying it, I totally get it. Like I have very minimal experience with programming. I tried to learn it and I was like, oh, this is not for me. But I can see how like you're sitting there trying to figure out, like, I have a start point and I have an end goal. How do I get there?
How do I get there? What are the steps you need to do? Yeah,
that's kind of how I am as a writer. Like I'll think of, okay, I have a start point. I have some elements I want to bring in. And then I have kind of an end point, like either a conclusion or a scene towards the end. And then it's like, how do I build the full structure? So I think that's a really cool way to look at it. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I imagine with writing more than code, it's a little bit easier to go from it's a bug, well, now it's a feature.
Okay, but that's how your ending slightly changes, right? You aim for your ending, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute, I had the wrong idea. I need to change this. I have a new product.
Yeah. Well, real quick, Claudia, it looks like our nerd on the road, Nathan's joining us. He's one of our special co-hosts. And Nathan, good to see you, buddy. How's it going?
Great. How are you guys?
Good, good. Oh, you're good, buddy. Nathan, this is Claudia Blood, our guest tonight. Oh, you have a cat. Yes.
I do.
We always celebrate on our podcast when we have cat cameos, like our special things. So you are now in that top tier of guests who brought a cat to the interview.
I have a cat.
So
D&D and cat, I'm in.
Yeah, you've hit our trifecta. You're like creative, D&D, cats. Boom.
Yeah.
That's our podcast if we had to put it in 3 words, you know? So good stuff. We like to talk with a lot of our guests who are authors about what's your process in terms of like outlining, or like how do you find bugs along the way and either use those to build new things? And if you want to tell us a little bit about your process there, that'd be cool.
Yeah. So for the Relic Trilogy, I actually had a dream about it, believe it or not. Oh, totally dream start. It was the inspiration.
That's
and
cool.
It was like this group of guys going through the jungle, and there's like this old architecture, and then like go in through the weeds, and there's like a table that's like old alien sort of thing. And they flip some switches, and it was like the old Terminator blue lightning bolt. Like, I was very creative when I was dreaming. And suddenly there's an 80s aerobics instructor there. And I went, what? Like, what the hell just happened? So I had to write the books to find out.
There you
So
go.
that's where, so inspiration like that, and then you try to build everything around it, and you come up with well, how did they get there, and who are they, and how did they get through time, and start asking all the what ifs and what happened.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so I'm a pantser up front, and then I get to a certain point and go, oh man, I got to bring all these threads together, and then I'm like desperately verbally plotting. Well, what if this happens? Or how come you do this? And could this happen? Yeah.
Yeah. You get all the note cards together, and then you have to just bust out the red string and start figuring out
how it all fits. Yep, exactly.
Actually, if you're dealing with time travel, that's perfect, because then you have everything just spread out on the board, and you can just, if anything ends up being a mistake, it was time travel.
It was time travel.
Yeah.
The thing with that book and the Ravine book too is time dilation and finding a calculator. Oh wait, she's in the ship for how long, and how many years go by on Earth now? Like, what percentage of light is she doing? To try and make sure it's, because you have to be realistic in your fake science fiction, right?
Yeah. Well, that's cool. You put the effort into that, because I feel like a lot of people who write about time travel don't think about it, on a physics and quantum physics level like that. So that's really cool that you're factoring in time dilation. That's really neat.
I like physics. I'm not good at it, and it's not my passion. I was a biologist for a while, but
that's cool.
Physics, I do like it a lot. So yeah.
So out of curiosity, does the knowledge of science, do you find that that's ever inhibiting your ability to be creative with the books?
Okay, so I have a zombie problem. Can I tell you my zombie problem?
We would love to hear.
Magical zombies. I have zero issue with magical zombies. You want a magical zombie? I'm in. I'm totally in. But a real live virus, no blood pumping, no heart pumping, like, muscles don't work like that. Like, dude, how are you moving? Like, the science behind that just does not work. So that's sort of like, so every time someone says zombie, is like, magic zombie, and then I can get over it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you feel about skeletons then?
I'm okay, because they're like, I can't picture a like science fiction way of doing skeleton. I mean, maybe they have some sort of like clear ectoplasm around them or something that's moving around, like a gel cube that's sort of like really thin. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Whatever.
I'm going to start writing up a stat block right now. I love it. Our next villain in our game. Yeah. That's fantastic.
So yeah, I don't think the scientific method has ever interfered with writing books. I just I'm able to go, all right, we're moving on.
That's good. Yeah. That's kind of like where you have to balance realism and being cumbersome with, because the truth can often be cumbersome and complicated, and people have a finite attention span when they're not doing a deep dive into something. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's got to be interesting and idealized and still meet their expectations in weird ways, right? Like, because if you don't, they're like, oh, this is unrealistic, or this would never happen. You're like, okay.
Yeah. Well, actually, I can circle
Yeah.
this back to programming and my very basic knowledge of it. You have a certain number of rules in your story, and you have to not break suspension of disbelief within that rule set, not necessarily the
Absolutely.
rule set of reality. So,
Absolutely. Or you get a null pointer exception and it blows a stack trace in your logs and you're screwed.
yep. And for me, that in my world, that's when someone reads it and goes, "I don't get it."
I don't
Or
get it. Or they're like, wait. What? What just happened? I'm putting this away. I'm not looking. Oh
so,
man.
Claudia, very important question. What is your favorite class to play in D&D and why?
Oh, okay. So I am kind of like the party healer, but I don't like being a cleric. Sorry.
Okay.
I
Interesting.
like favored souls because I
Favorites.
like all the, and I always get the augment healing in 3.5. You can do that and it gives you
Oh.
extra. Yeah. So I'm like, and then I have, it has pathetic attack spells. I mean, it really truly does. So like the first couple levels, I think it gets Searing Light in like the third level or something, third level spells, but everything else is always like super healing, reach spell, augment healing. I don't know, whatever other thing. So it's usually that. Though I did play, what was that? It's the rogue that's not the rogue that all of the halflings and gnomes do. Very trickstery. I'm just gonna have to look that up, and I can picture my character sheet, and I cannot for the life of me remember what it was.
I'm trying
Anyway,
to think. Like I said, my experience has all been in 5e.
in
So,
5, yeah, I don't know any 5e
is it like a
rules.
subclass of rogue, or I don't know. I'm sure the Twitterverse will
Beguiler.
tell
It's
us.
a beguiler.
Ooh, that's a great name for a
Ooh,
class. I don't know the beguiler.
beguiler.
Tyler.
Yes.
Is that
It's
kind
a
of like a
beguiler in
charisma-based
3.5.
rogue?
It's yeah, kind of, yeah.
I feel like
But
that's some sort of bard just by the name.
I know it sounds bardish, but doesn't sing, and there's a lot of like overlap with thief, but he's not the like, or she's not the open door kind of thief because she gets spells too. So it's
Oh,
kind of like a sorcerer thief sort of combo pack,
that'd be
but
fun
very
to play.
sneaky. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
cool.
very sneaky.
Yeah. I have
So.
found that doing like being the healer of the party and trying to go, because I've played a non-cleric healer, and like I realized very quickly in D&D clerics are really overpowered and they get a ton of spell slots. And when you're not a cleric, when you're trying to be a healer, you really run out of spell slots real quick.
Yeah, you absolutely do. Yep, and hope you have a wand that'll see you through, or you can rest because they never let you rest.
Yeah, I tried
Guilty
to
as charged as a DM.
Yeah, tried to go with the celestial warlock healer,
Ooh.
and when you have 2 spell slots,
oh yeah,
it's
that sucks.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, you get other things, but yeah, the 2 spell slots. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, that at least in the clerics, but so if you're a cleric though, then it's all healing and you don't get any of like the fun other kind of spells for what you're meant for the day. So
True.
if you do a cleric, so yeah.
But so at least in 5e,
Yeah.
like the clerics have all the spells.
Do they really? Okay,
Like,
see, so I have to play 5e is what you're telling me.
Yeah, you really should, because like they have just a ton of spells like that you wouldn't even think would be cleric spells. Like the cleric that I'm playing in another game,
Yeah.
like I gave him a melee weapon because I was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna need this because I'm just gonna use all of my spells for healing, and I just realized no, I just never run out of spell slots. Like level 10, you're just
oh yeah, level 10.
constant,
There's some
yeah.
sweet spells. Yes.
Casting them, just never out.
But the bad guys have those spells too, and then when you get those death spells and you do, I mean, that can be, yeah.
Yeah.
It also helps that like even as the healer, I'm not healing the party.
You're just healing yourself.
They get at least 3 death saves.
I did like the first thing that I wrote that I will never publish was a D&D like campaign book that I did, and it has like all the classic characters, and it started off on like a high mountain and whatever, and all was lost. Oh my goodness. And yeah, no, that will never see the light of day.
It could be fun to do in the field. I've actually, one of my games I'm doing right now, Well, so what I was doing when I was world building some of my fantasy novels was I took what I'd world built when I was still in the outline phase, and I just
Mhm.
played them as campaigns with my friends just to kind
Smart.
of build things up. And then I cherry picked little things here and there that I was like, okay, those could be scenes in the story, but then I kind of had my own narrative I did. But it was really well received, and so now I'm doing another campaign set in the same world,
Yeah.
and my friends are taking it in a totally different way, and so I'm like, oh, this is different enough for my book. I'm just going to write this as like a Kindle Vella series, and that's been super
Fun.
fun. Just because it helps me summarize the plot too for my players, where they're just like, when did this happen? I'm like, well, let me just jump back to when I wrote it down. So it's been fun. So
That's cool. That's a great
yeah,
idea. And how people get ideas, it is really pretty amazing. Dreams, D&D campaigns. I mean,
yes,
you see your dog and you're like, hey, you could be a werewolf or whatever, you know.
Mhm.
totally, yeah. Well, I wanted to pivot kind of and ask um so getting into publishing, like tell us about
Yeah.
your first book you did and like how you got to achieve publishing, and then like what are being the biggest challenges or the biggest tips you'd give to new writers, kind of stuff like
Yeah.
that.
So the first thing that I tried to do, that I tried writing, but not the D&D one, it was something when I was more serious about doing it. It was I decided, okay, it started off as an erotica, and then it ended up as a
Mhm.
horror, and then it ended up as like a paranormal mystery, right? Yeah, yeah, or
I'm
suspense, I guess
sold.
is
I'll
more
read it.
accurate.
Mhm.
Yeah, but the thing was, the first book is really hard to get done, and when you make it really complicated, and even though I love all those different elements, but actually writing an end-to-end true stories with beginning, middle, and end, and the rising tension, and all the other crap that's supposed to go in it, um, it's really hard to do. So I had to take that story and I wrote it as a pure suspense
Ooh,
just to get it done. I was like, I'm do pure suspense, just get it done, beginning to end. And I got it done. I was like, and then I hated it, right? Because it doesn't have any of the elements I love. It didn't have any like magical things. It didn't have any science. It didn't have like, right? So that I rewrote it and added in the elements of the fantasy to it and made the
ah,
bad guy a doppelganger and like added in like all sorts of, right? And added demons and whatever else was appropriate for the book. And then once that was done, then I went through and published it. I decided to indie publish
nice.
because I have a number of different friends who have had contracts with publishing companies that did not have good stories to tell.
Yeah,
Um, and you know, you look at the market now and all of their marketing monies, which is why you want them for you because of the marketing monies, go towards those people they already know are going to make them money.
right.
And it's not me starting out, probably, right? Like I'm like, dude, I'm new.
Yeah,
Mhm.
So I decided I had 5 books ready to go and I did it
wow,
bam, 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 bam.
nice.
What I probably shouldn't have done because I have ADHD when it comes to genre is they were like science fiction. Oh, there's a fantasy series. Oh, there's a, you know, paranormal suspense,
Wow.
which sucks from a marketing perspective, but
Mhm.
Still,
it is.
when you find a reader who likes your stuff, they're going to be like, I loved how Claudia
I
wrote
love,
sci-fi. How would she do fantasy? I want this, you know? I do
yeah,
that with authors where like I'll read something and I'll be
I
like,
will.
they have a they have a book that's a totally different genre. Like, okay, let's
Let me
see.
try it. Yeah.
Yeah,
And you give the beginning a try. And if you like it, just, yeah, then.
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I got
Yeah.
a question for you. This is a little technical, but when you released, so you had 5 books ready to go because I'm an indie author
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
Like, did you release them very close together, or
I
did you space
did.
them out? Yeah.
I did them every month for the 5 months or whatever it was until I ran out of books.
Yeah.
Yep.
I did the same with my first 2. I did one and then I was like, you know what, my second one's ready to go. It's been 2 months, but let's go
Yeah.
for it. And so yeah. So
In some ways, that trilogy, that third book was not playing nice with me. And so like the fact that it was there and there was a pre-order and it was out there, I mean, it's probably the only reason the stupid thing got done. I mean, I love the book, don't get me wrong, but it was like one of those, why do I do this to myself? It's so complicated. How does this work? You know, and
yeah.
then you just kind of, okay, you just got to do it. There's a deadline, you have to do it. Like coding too. Hey, there you
Oh,
go. There's
nice.
Yeah.
project plan, codes due. Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
That's awesome.
Did that work for you doing your 2 together and doing it like every 30 days or whatever? Some people say 2 weeks, 30 days, depending
So
upon algorithms.
I did it. It was like 2.5 months. So
Okay.
I released my first book in December of 2021,
Okay.
and it had a pretty good launch. And then my second book I did in February, and I think I didn't do enough social media on there because it did not launch as well. But so they've been out now for 8 and wait, no, yeah, 8
I
and
know
10 months.
what's today?
8 and 12 months. I don't know. I can't do math. Whatever.
Okay.
But yeah, so they've been doing all right. So, and I'm working on my third book right now. So.
Cool. Very
Yeah,
cool.
so it's fun. But yeah, no, I think the marketing stuff, that's something I really want to learn more as an indie author and figure out
Absolutely.
ways to grow my presence. But like you said though, I've heard a lot of pros to going the indie author route than to going the traditional publishing nowadays. So I'm happy
Yep.
with the choice, you know. So it's been
And I hope that
because you get that
people, I
full
mean,
creative freedom, which is nice.
right. And all of the downside, right? So you pay for your own editor, you pay for your
Right.
covers, you pay for, you know, all that stuff. And
Mm.
please edit, right? Like there's typos sometimes
Yes.
to get through, but we all do try to edit and do what we can to make them the best damn books possible.
Yep. This is a great place to plug Will because I hire him to do my covers and he's awesome. So everyone listening, if you need a book cover artist, at Will Shaw Art on Instagram and Twitter.
Sweet.
Yeah. Nathan, how's your night going, man? Good to see you.
Thank you. It's going. I'm just sitting here waiting, like usual. Joys and live dog trucker.
Yeah. Yeah. Nathan's a long distance truck driver, so he's a nerd on the road who joins us when he can. We always like having you, buddy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm more local nowadays, but
Oh, that's
I'm
good.
I'm enjoying this job a lot more than the longer hauls. I'm home every night.
Oh, that's great. That's
good.
awesome, man.
Gives me a chance to sit here and listen to audiobooks.
That's good. That's a great. Okay, forget the question I had before. That's lame in comparison. Let's talk audiobooks for a minute. Claudia, have you done audiobooks of your novels?
I have. I've got the Relic Trilogy has audio. Yep.
Nice.
I went through draft to digital and went through. They've got a program that moves you over, so you get your fee waived for who's connected over that. I don't know if they still do now, but when I did the audiobooks and
that's
ended
cool.
up finding a narrator and going through the all interview process and yeah. So
did you use Amazon's like ACX portal or did you do it somewhere else?
I uploaded to Amazon through ACX, and then I've got it also on a bunch of the other vendors as well.
Nice.
Because I decided to go wide, right? I mean,
that's
Amazon.
Awesome, yeah. Yeah.
I love and hate you at the same time.
Right. It's like,
yeah. I've got to ask, when you are working with those audiobook auditions, like, what kind of criteria are you looking? Are you looking for somebody who really gets the character voice, or just someone that's pleasant to listen to, or like, what was kind of your process there?
Part of it was voice. Like I didn't like I've listened to audiobooks where you're just like, dude, like seriously, inflection is awesome. And then or that you can't tell the characters apart. Right, and there they go, and I'm like, no. So there was a lot of like, did the voice sound right? Like, could you do different voices? And then I had a little bit of struggle. The main character's really a dude, so I figured it had to be a dude voice, and so there was a lot of like asking friends and asking other authors, like, what are the protocols? Like, do people expect the same gender of the voice of the main character? And do they expect, like, do they expect the female chapters, because it's a multi-point of view, to be the female voice and the male voice? Or and they're just like, girl, like, stop, you're making it too complicated. Pick the main character's voice, and like, and then if you like it and they can do the voices you want and the reading comes across well, then go for it and you feel good about them. So I was paranoid, and I like took the gentleman samples and I sent it to my sister and I sent it to Kelly, my PA, and I sent it all around. I'm like, okay, what do you guys think? Like, does it sound okay? Because you know, what do I know? I get over like and hearing someone else read your work is like, I don't know how you guys feel, but I was like, oh God, did I really write that?
Oh,
and
really?
Like,
for me, I loved
it. And I'm like, oh.
No, I can understand it. It's especially if it's been a little while since like you wrote something. I imagine just coming back of, oh man, I could rewrite that so much better now. Yeah, because I'm an illustrator, so like I'll look back at something I did like 3-4 years ago, and it's always either of I used to be so much better, or oh my God, I was so terrible. And there's
Yeah.
just no in between.
There's no in between. And it's even worse when you like look at something, you read it, you're like, God, who wrote this shit? God, it was me.
We're our own worst critics.
We are our own worst critics. Yeah.
Yeah.
I even explored trying to make it into like a graphic novel and go down that path, but that's really hard to break into and to get like, you know, designers and illustrators and things like that and afford to do it because, you know, I'm an indie, right? So, yeah. Though I've got a girlfriend who decided to go simple as an author, as an indie author. So she's got her single genre, she's got Amazon only, she does Facebook ads, and she does great. I mean, she does really well. She's like simple, and then she could tweak little things and has all of her data. I always worry that long term it's like all of your eggs in one basket, but I'm like, dude, it's working for you, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
At that point, though, you like you gotta, if you go a little too simple, then you kind of pigeonhole yourself.
Yep.
There, and then like if you do want to ever do anything else, what do you just go with a pen name, or do you just try to like hope your audience will accept whatever new direction you're going in?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But rebranding is hard.
Yeah, branding is hard. Well, you could just say branding is hard, period.
True, not even rebranding. Branding is hard.
Branding,
yeah.
Yeah, they do expect indie authors to kind of know it all, and it's a hard, like you're running a business and a marketing and you know, writing on top of all of that. So yeah,
it's an adventure.
Yeah,
but it's so fulfilling. Like, I don't know about you, like I assume you've gotten some comments where it's like, that really resonated with me, and like as an author, for me, I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, you know.
Yes. I periodically get emails from people from the newsletter that, you know, they don't know how it makes my day, and I'm always like, sweet, someone wrote me.
That's awesome.
That's what they said. And he pats me on the head like any good husband does and moves on.
So what was like the coolest email you've ever gotten from a fan?
The one that really stuck with me was that she had never read another author that did characters as well, had such deep and believable characters as I had. And, you know, of course, you know, the little part of you was like, did she read my book? But then I was like, you know, you got to accept it, right? Like, all joking aside, I was like, wow, like I was like, woo. And I always write back and I was like, thank you so much for reaching out. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Like, and try to be, you know,
that's
awesome.
awesome.
Fight back that response of, I think you have the wrong number.
Right. Or what's wrong with you? No, I don't think that's seriously. Just I joke it appropriately.
Well, Claudia, what are some of your goals for the future in your creative career?
The Renegades Rising has 4 novellas that I'm in middle, and I tried writing it sequentially, so I've got like 15,000 in one and 10,000 another and 2,000 another, and then like a big book that's supposed to bring it all together with how they save the world and, you know,
that's cool.
That they do. Yeah. And then I've got, and I have many half-started projects or mostly started projects. So all my series have their next book half written, just not done, because you get to the point where like, crap, I got to rewrite that because I forgot about this. And then, I'm hopeful that I can get Renegades Rising and then circle back and get all the rest of those done within the next year.
Well, that's a good goal. That's doable.
We'll see. Maybe. Yeah. Life gets in the way sometimes.
It does. Yeah. My third book's taking a little longer than I thought it would, just because of life, you know, so. But it's coming.
With all of the sequels, have you, when you were initially starting off this project, which you had the trilogy, you have the spin-off, now you have multiple sequels and novellas, was that the plan from the start? Or do you think you were going to just write one book and then be done with it?
I really thought that I was going to write a lot of one books, so a lot of standalones. But the things that I kept wanting to do were bigger than one book. Like you needed something that was bigger than that. And some of the things I wanted to do didn't fit nicely in a single book structure. So like Do you know what I mean? So that's why it ended up with this particular one having 4 novellas, because if it would have been like just one big long book, it would have been 200,000 words, and then it would have been all one POV if it was sequential, because it was like the time dilation and with everything else.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden all these other characters come up, and I can sure people would be like, what are you smoking? Like, what are you doing? Right? Like, that's not how that goes. And so you sort of had to artificially break it up.
Yeah.
So I also realized that I like writing series. Like, you like exploring the other characters and figuring out what happens, and like, you know, staying in that world a little bit longer. So yeah. Once you
gotta
get it all set
imagine
up.
that's gonna help with world building too, because then like you've established this world and you don't have to keep like reestablishing everything every time.
That's true. Yep. That's very true. Though if you make enough time go, or if you change a different planet, then you might have some wiggle room that you could cheat and make things different.
Yeah.
So
does that do you find that helps with like theming, like keeping a like doing the shorter books, you're able to like keep a consistent theme in there? Or is that still kind of a challenge to like narrow down one?
I mean, do you get this where like I end up starting to write, and then like as I'm writing it, you know, I have this sort of like concept in the back of the head, and at some point in the book you kind of go, oh, this book is about this.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, I should probably clean that up then, you know, like make sure this all kind of works. But I do think I write less than I talk. Like I once I get going, I'm a talker, but when I write, like I'm always very much like oh, I don't need to explain that. Oh, they don't need this. I don't need that. And so it's always shorter is a little bit easier. And I think it's easier to see sort of the, you know, the full arc that way. I don't know.
Yeah. That makes sense, especially if you keep it from getting like too congested there in a short book.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, no, and I think a lot of people like that where it's direct and it's concise, and like, I think it was Elmore Leonard, I think he did more screenplays than novels, but he did novels as well. And he was like, his rule was, he was like, if there's something in my book that feels necessary, but it's boring, I get rid of it. He's like, my audience will bridge it. And I was like, okay, like,
I like it.
I was like, that's cool. Yeah. And again, a lot of his stuff like works. So I'm like, okay, cool. Like if I can really strive for that, that's a good benchmark, you know?
But don't you think that different people are different ways? Like I have another writing girlfriend who, like, we joke, like my chapter is 2,000 words. And I was like, oh my God, it's getting big. And she's like, her chapter is 6,000 words. And she's like, oh my God, I need to cut it. And I'm just like, we should probably be in the middle somewhere.
Yeah. I don't know. I've only written 2 books, and with my 3rd book now, the chapters are really short. So I'm probably doing 12 to 1,500 per chapter.
Is it lots of like action? Like, do you have a lot of like cliffhangers too? Because I love cliffhangers.
I do. I am doing that where like it's almost, because the scope of my 3rd book, I guess I'll just drop the premise right now. Might as well. Will's done awesome art for it. I'll put that up on the edit. But so
it is interesting, and some things just naturally come out shorter, come out longer, like you said, like what you're depending on what you're writing. Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
So that's an interesting question of like chapter length. It's like it totally depends on the writing style and the project and the tone and everything.
And the chapter, like, is there a 600-word chapter? Okay, maybe, right? Like depending upon what's going on.
I started doing that I have 2 Kindle Vella series that I'm writing kind of in perpetuity and doing those. And that one, the minimum is 600, and I end up doing between 600 to 900 words because it's a more serialized, fast-paced little thing, you know. So that's been interesting too. So
it does also, if you switch up the chapter numbers, that can be a really interesting tool to use, because I've read books where like they're fairly consistent, and then you get to a chapter that's like 50 words as just like a really short thing, and like you pay a lot more attention to what's there just because it's abnormal. Or you get to like an exceedingly long chapter, and then it feels like by the end of it you feel like, oh man, this is such a long chapter, or this is so draining to read, or whatever. And so I think that it ends up being just kind of an interesting way to kind of frame things, if that makes sense.
No, I think you've got a point, Will, because like as an author, and I'm sure you can expand on this, Claudia, but like like we were saying earlier, we build our own rules for our story. So when you break those in a creative way, it has meaning, and we can use that to give further information to the audience. So
Yep, or emphasize a point, or
exactly.
pop. It's a splash of color in your
Totally.
Yeah.
your palette. Yeah, we'll go with
Yeah.
it.
Let's stick with the coding metaphor.
Yeah. It's interesting. We were actually having a discussion a couple episodes ago about the use of AI, and that was one
Ooh.
of the things that I was thinking of. Like, you can really teach an AI to do just about anything, but the issue with when you are working with programming like an AI is you can't really train it when to break rules. You can only give it rules to follow. And you can't
Interesting.
have a rule to break rules specifically, because then that's just another rule and it becomes just
Right.
part of the same system.
Interesting. I wonder if you could have like a random loop that every third time, whatever's inside of like the cache or whatever, suddenly you can, it gets thrown away. So for that next run through, that rule's no longer there or
Oh,
something,
that
right?
could
Like,
have interesting results.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you could come up with creative ways to sort of break it. I know that some of the AI and learning algorithms, which is not my specialty, don't actually really work that way. But I was just thinking about, regular old code, boring code.
Well, and the thing is though, like if you go somewhere like that, you're dealing with a certain degree of like planned randomness. But that's not, when you're working with breaking rules, it's not necessarily like you're planning to have a rule broken here. It's that you, as an artist, you understand that it will be effective to break a rule at this point.
You want them to break that rule because it does something and it gets them something extra in it. It's like they're looking at the rule base and saying, oh, if I break this rule, I can reach this goal, right? Or whatever the underlying thing is. Yeah. But I don't think they do anything like that, to your point.
Yeah, I don't think you could program an AI to be able to do that, because there's just such a, you need such a fundamental understanding of the art form that you're using to understand the effect that you're going to have.
Yep. I mean, you teach people how to, right? And we're sort of programmed like in our own ways, and you can teach, but not everybody, to your point, right? Like you probably tried to teach me something with visual art and I'd be like, ooh, thanks. I have no idea what you're talking about. Thank you. But, and I wonder if there's something, inherent in our different brains with different ways that we perceive the world that could get translated over. I don't know.
Yeah. I think I know, right? It's kind of like that. It bleeds into the philosophical, where it's like, is there some mystery element to the system of, learning algorithms and stuff like that that we have that we just don't understand? That's kind of that missing piece to make a computer be able to learn the same ways humans do, or think outside the box, is kind of what we're talking about, where it's like, I don't know, it's fascinating to me.
And at a certain point, you could that ends up just working out to being a thought process of a fantasy, which then gets us back to sci-fi. Full circle.
Well, it's kind of funny, the Ravine book, I realized just actually yesterday that there's this whole destiny kind of thing underlying it, right? So I've got times and I've got time loops where they keep playing this chess game and things keep happening over and over again. And only certain people, once they're knocked out of the ruts of their destiny, are able to have free action. That's sort of like the rules that I have in my head for this world. And I'm like, well, shit, I hope that's not true in real life, because, what does it say for us, being philosophical and all that? But,
that's a cool concept, though. I like that.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing that where sci-fi really shines, is that you can have something that is like pretty realistic, and then you can introduce this fantasy into there, and you get to just kind of apply that to, like, how does that impact the real world? Like, to go back to one of the classic science fiction shows of Star Trek, and it's like, okay, well, what implication does the would a transporter have? What does hyperspace mean? Like,
right. What would it do to the society to have that? What does it do to the people who are involved intimately with it, on their day-to-day lives? What is it? Yeah. What are the things they care about when those are the technologies that they have access to?
It's
Yeah.
almost like pre-scientific method where you're like, all right, I can't test this hypothesis yet, but
Right.
based on what variables I can think of, how would it work?
Well,
Like,
how would it work? But it's also your stance in writing, right? Like whether you're a romantic or you think that people deserve justice, or whether you have like whatever your underlying, beliefs are, you end up having stories that go that way.
totally.
Yeah.
Well, Claudia, this has been a fantastic interview. Thank you so much for your time. And again, to everyone who's listening or watching, check out the video and podcast description. It'll have a link to Claudia's author page and your website. And we'd love to have you back on the show again. This was a great talk. It was really fun.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. And D&D beforehand, it was like, what a great prep, right?
It was awesome. Yes.
Yeah, we'll have to come back and just do a D&D podcast.
I'd have to read up on 5.0 then, so I'm not laying 3.5 on you. And you guys are like, you are smoking crack.
We can learn some 3.5.
There you go.
We'll meet you in the middle. We'll learn a little bit of both. It'll be cool.
So
cool.
Well, what we'll have to do is we'll all have to get together for a game, and I'll play 4th edition, so nobody's.
So nobody.
Yes. It's a plan now.
It's a plan.
Yes. Well, again, this has been Nerds and Friends. Thank you so much for your time, Claudia. This was fantastic. We'll see you next time. Okay.
Bye.